Hi everyone, Mark with MP Shares. I wanted to just start showing off some of my hobbies here, some of the stuff that I picked up during COVID. I started collecting fish probably when I was a teenager, living with my parents, and just had one or two little tanks back then, nothing major. Um, but as I've gotten older, COVID of course hit. I only had one little 10-gallon tank upstairs, but one tank turned into two, which turned into seven now, I believe. But you learn that you can't put certain fish in with other ones, otherwise you start having issues with them fighting, or the Oscar over here in the corner pretty much would eat everything. So ended up getting multiple tanks, and I had this dining room that I never used. I mean, it was a catch-all. I'd come in from work, throw my mail, my laptop bag, whatever I'm carrying, it would just end up on the table. I've never spent any time in here, and it just became a catch-all. So I figured, let's just tear down the table, throw it in the garage, and turn this into like a usable space that I would enjoy. So I ended up pulling everything out and putting my tanks down in here. Built a couple stands that I needed, and from there it just got more and more and more. And then when COVID hit, of course, start getting more and more tanks. But I just want to show you around, show you what I have, and then maybe in the future show you how I take care of these tanks and some of the little tricks and tips that I have that work for me. I know there's a lot of guys out there do this professionally, but I just want to show off what I have. So I'll give you a little tour here. So this is the dining room here. Once we pulled the table out, there's a lot more usable space, and I spend more time in here now. Now I actually will sit in this chair and look at some of the tanks and wheel it around and spend a lot of time in here actually taking care of them. It's a little therapeutic, gets rid of some stress. Down here, first tank I have, this is my 29-gallon. And you can see in here there's a couple rainbow fish swimming up at the top there. And there's one little Danio over here in the corner. Now, he actually thinks he's one of the rainbows, and he'll actually school with them. I think it's basically because they have the same kind of, swim habits, where they like to school together, shoal. Then we have two angelfish in here. I had four at one point, but I had a issue when they were in another tank where they got camellianus worms, and it's a pretty bad parasite that they had. So I had to treat them with, I think it's called flubendazole. And it's the same thing you get in like, heartwarming products for dogs and cats. But there is a fish version that you can buy. It's not that expensive either, but you have to mix it with their food and get them to eat it. And sometimes when they're riddled too much with the worms, they just don't make it. So these two, of course, made it, and they're pretty peaceful. So I have them in this tank, with the rainbows. There's a couple plecos in here. There's a female sitting down in this log down here, and then there's another one that makes his home in the hole of this fake wood right here. There's a pictus catfish that never stops moving. This guy has energy galore. I think he's almost about a year old now. I've never had any issues with him hurting anything else in here, even though they say, if anything's, 3/4 the size of its body and can fit in its mouth, it's going to eat it. But there's some corridoras that actually hitchhiked into here on a couple of the Amazon swords. I had them in another tank, and grew out a little bit too big, so I removed them. But there were eggs on it, and of course they hatched, and a couple of them survived in here. You can see super red pleco down here in the corner. And there's one of those little cories. And they're super cute. They swim around and just, go after any of the extra food that hits the bottom. And then moving on. Here we have my big tank, the 75-gallon. And in here is my Oscar, where I believe it's a she. I can't tell real well. When I started off, she was just the size of my pinky finger. And of course, she exploded in growth. And she runs around in this tank and pretty much keeps everyone in check and makes sure there's no fighting. But I've never really seen any real aggression in here, except when it comes to feeding time. She pretty much tells everyone to get out of her way so until she gets her fill. And then we got two Severums right here. And these little guys, I had to pull any of the plants that I used to have in here out because they kept eating them all. And then there's my blue Acara. I love these guys. I have him in here with a green terror that's swimming around in the back somewhere. And there he is. Now the blue Acara and the green terror usually hang out together. I don't know if they're somehow bred from the same species, and maybe it's the Acaras are an offshoot of the green terrors or whatnot, but they seem to think they're the same, and they swim together all the time. Now the two Bala sharks over here are getting quite large. Eventually I'm going to have to get a new tank for him. He's going to outgrow this tank pretty quickly, so I'm going to have to get something much, much larger to house him. But I've always loved these guys since I was a kid, so I had to have one. And I knew going into it, I'm going to have to upgrade the tank and get something for him. So eventually, him and maybe the Oscar will go into it. These two will go into a new tank. And there is a Jack Dempsey in here also, but he always likes to hide. And he is down here in this hole, and you can't even really tell he's in there. But maybe he'll come out eventually. Also, I have some Siamese algae eaters in here. Now, this tank is due for a cleanup. It's been about a week or so. And I was messing around here earlier and stirred up some of the substrate, so the water's a little cloudy. But I need to get in there and vac it out again and change the water. As we come over here, we have our 20 tall. And this is where all my breeding plecos are at. Let me so they'll go down in these caves here, and you might be able to see one. There's one of the males. And then all their little babies are swimming around in here. A lot of them came when they hatched were not the albino style. They came out just as regular plecos. So they have their regular coloring. And along with them, I have my swordtails, which I started off with 4 of these guys. They just exploded. And they were in a 10-gallon tank upstairs. And I decided I didn't want that tank up there anymore, so I brought them down here, put them in with this tank. And from there, they've just kept going, kept breeding. Got a couple of males showing up. And as you can see, this one right here, he's the oldest. But there's a couple mixed in here where they're starting to, finally get their little swords on them. They start to peek out as males, so that means there's going to be a lot more breeding in here. Right as about 2 weeks ago, I was only seeing 2 males, and now it looks like there might be 5 or 6 about to start up. I'm not sure how well they'll survive in here because there's not that much cover, but in the past they haven't really eaten their fry when they've hatched. I'm going to have to go get a sponge though and stick on the end of the filter so I'm not sucking them up into that. And as we move around here, we get to the big cabinet. Now this cabinet I got from a family member. And this thing is solid oak. I mean, it's a couple 100 pounds. Moving it in here was a pain in the ass. But it was designed to fit one of those old tube style TVs. And you can't really get a flat screen in it. And, I mean, you get a smaller one, but I thought maybe I'll just cut the whole top of it off, grab a Sawzall and turn it into a little stand that way. But then I got the idea that maybe if I built inside of it a couple shelves or something like that with some 2x4s, I can convert it to another display. So in the bottom I have all my, gear for taking care of the aquariums, and also houses my pumps and electrical. But in here I have my And here are my fancy goldfish. So there's two of those in the corner there, along with a comet. And the comet's eventually going to end up in a pond out back because, well, he's going to get way too big to live in here anyway. There's also some more Corydoras in here that hitched a ride on some plants. I don't see any right now, but then also a couple plecos in here too. There is a dwarf Mexican lobster, but he likes to hide. And it's rare to find him out unless it's feeding time. I don't see him currently. But maybe he'll come out where we can see him in another video. Oh wait, there he is. Hanging out right on top there. And as we move down, I have my glow light tetras. Now these guys, I had some neons in the past, but the neons I'd only be able to keep like 50% of them, and I'd start getting die-offs. With these glow lights, I started off with 9, I still have 9. They seem to be pretty hardy, and I have a couple of baby plecos mixed in here with them just to patrol the substrate. This tank did not get any straggler Corydoras. But these neons haven't ever bred for me either, so hopefully one day maybe they will. But moving over here, I have a breeding pair, well, I guess 3 breeding Corys. So it's 2 females and a male. They've actually laid eggs in the back corner there. I don't know if you can see if it's clear enough. The water's stirred up because I just did a water change in here. I do it quite often in these tanks. And then over here I actually have the babies growing out. And if I move the filters, we can see them going nuts in there. And they do pretty well in here in these little tanks. These are little 2.5 gallon, just grow out tanks. And then I'll give these guys away to some of my friends and whatnot. We don't really have the ability to go to any of the fish shows or the trading swap meets anymore, just because of the COVID regulations. And then here is all the albinos of bristlenose that I picked out of the other tank. And you can see them all move around back in there. Once again, this water's pretty cloudy too because I just changed it. And one thing you'll notice too is I do have live plants in all my most of my tanks, I should say. Here I have some subaquatic ones. I believe it's called a ribbon plant. That's just something you pick up at PetSmart. You gotta be careful though, because a lot of people grab it and they think that this is actually a plant that'll grow underwater, which will kill it almost immediately. It just likes its roots wet, and that's about it. And it grows pretty well in here. I have one single light hanging above that, feeds them all. And then in this tank, the neon or the glow light tetra tank, I have some pothos cuttings. So I started growing some pothos, and I took 1 or 2 cuttings, stuck in there, and it just roots like crazy. And these plants pull all the nitrites and nitrates out of the water and just suck all the crap out, and it actually extends the quality of your water exponentially. It's unreal. There's also a spider plant in there, and you can see him here. He's actually thrown off an offshoot runner where he's building some more plants, some babies off of him, some pups. And I'll wait till they get roots, and then I'll pluck those off, and then I move them to another tank, or I propagate them somewhere else. Up on the goldfish tank, we can see a lot more pothos. So this is actually started off from one little cutting, and it's vined out like crazy. And then there's another one back here where he's even growing behind the tank. And then this spider plant was an offshoot off of that plant I just showed earlier. Just a little baby, and they just grow nuts. They love dirty tank water, which helps me out a lot because it slows me down on how often I have to actually, change the water on these things. But that's my little fish room. Hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Thanks.